Maajid Nawaz on LBC.
I have a guest with me, Jonathan Sacerdoti, on the line. He's a leading campaigner against anti-Semitism, because if some of you who are listening to our show yesterday will remember that I spent an hour discussing, or asking you, in fact, whether you think the far right is resurgent in the UK. Well, today there has been news that the government plans to ban two neo-Nazi linked organisations, because in particular, one, that is, the Times reports, has been, well, it's called the Yorkshire branch of what's called the National Action, has been openly inciting for the death of Jewish people. And the Northwest Infidels has been openly praising Thomas Mayer, the killer of Joe Cox MP, saying she got what she deserved. So Jonathan Sacerdoti is on the line, as I said, a leading campaigner against anti-Semitism. Thank you for joining me, Jonathan.
Good afternoon, Maajid.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Well, this news is troubling. Neo-Nazis on the rise in the UK. Have you witnessed that? Are you seeing a rise in anti-Semitism by these neo-Nazis?
The truth is, I think that British Jewish people have always been familiar with anti-Semitism from across the board, whether it's been from the far right or whether it's been from Islamist anti-Semites. And I think it does us no good to...
I could probably add the far left to that as well, Jonathan.
You absolutely can add the far left. And I mean, not even so far anymore when we see the mainstream Labour Party, the opposition party, having several anti-Semitism controversies in recent months. So it's certainly not a good time for British Jews who are concerned about rising anti-Semitism. And the question about whether or not it's rising specifically on the far right is a pertinent one when we see things like the killing of Joe Cox. That wasn't, of course, an anti-Semitic attack, but any kind of attack that's based on racist prejudice like that is something that puts fear into Jewish people who have a great familiarity with what can happen when societies don't take seriously enough threats against minorities of any kind, but especially against Jewish people.
I've often wondered, Jonathan, what obsession, what it is. I mean, the one thing that unites far-left extremist fascists and far-right neo-Nazis and Islamist theocrats, the one thing that unites them all, though they hate each other, is their anti-Semitism. What is it about their obsession with the Jewish people in that way that they all seem to disagree on everything but their hatred of each other and of Jews?
And I'll go one step further as well to say it's quite disturbing when we see, for example, the far left embrace these otherwise effectively far-right and fascist ideologies, whether it is of the far right or of extreme right-wing Islamism. They're willing to embrace these people because they feel that there is some commonality in cause. And just to go off on a slight tangent, we're seeing, I think, the same phenomenon after the death of Fidel Castro, where we've seen some on the left quite happy to turn a blind eye to some extremely oppressive and hideous behaviour from a dictator against minorities such as gay people, when they are willing to ignore that because they feel that he furthered the cause of the left. We begin to see exactly the same kind of problem that I think manifests in terms of anti-Semitism as well, uniting these otherwise very different groups.
All right.
And Jewish people, unfortunately, have this phenomenon throughout their history where various groups will hate them to this extreme extent. And I think the difference perhaps between anti-Semitism and other forms of racism, which is important to draw out here as well, is that while other forms of racism often focus on denigrating a particular minority group and saying that they are somehow inferior, stupid, lazy, things like that, anti-Semitism all too often takes the form that it says that Jews are manipulative, controlling, too clever for their own good, run the media, run the banks, and are effectively using undercover techniques to manipulate everyone else, effectively saying that in a way they're cleverer and are controlling people. And so I think that people...
And therefore more dangerous.
Often, more dangerous, and often it means that those who have, albeit an admirable intention of supporting underdogs, feel that racism against Jewish people, if motivated in those terms, doesn't class them as an underdog, and therefore somehow there's a bit of a blind spot when it comes to attacking Jews on that basis.
Well, Jonathan, I said yesterday on this show, never again, and that we would continue to resist the rise of neo-Nazism and any other form of extremism in this country, and I considered it a form of treachery against the legacy and memory of our grandfathers' generations who fought the Nazis in the war, in World War II, and a form of treachery to submit ourselves to any form of foreign Nazism or Italian neo-fascism, as Nick Griffin has just done. Thank you for joining me, Jonathan Sacerdoti, leading campaigner against anti-Semitism.